people are saying, are we still waiting in chat? Okay, I see you now.
Hi, I'm Kate LaRue. Sorry about that bit of a delay. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to make this 3D map, 3D printed terrain map like the one behind me. Here it is in person, so you can get a sense of the scale. The area shown on the map is Stewart Lake in the Enchantments area of Washington State. And the hike shown on the map is the hike where I got engaged to my husband. So I created this 3D terrain map as an anniversary present. So I only have half an hour and I need to move quickly, so let's get started. To begin, you're going to need a few things. Most important is elevation data. You'll also, if you want to put GPS tracks or any other kind of vector or point data on top of the map, have that ready, as well as water bodies for the area that you're interested in. That's optional, but it helps the map look a little better. Along the way, we'll add a bounding box and aerial imagery. Here's an outline that I'll leave up during the demo so you can kind of keep track of where we are in all the steps. The first step is to create an aerial image. So I'm going to go and pull up QGIS. For the record, I'm using QGIS 3.12.1. So you can pull up any base map, doesn't matter. We're not going to use the base map. This is just to make sure we are at the right place on Earth. For this demo, I'm going to make a terrain map of a different area in Washington State, the High Divide Trail in the Olympic National Park, which is something else that I hiked recently. So here's the trail. This is my GPS track that I have brought out of Strava and put into QGIS. But as you can see, it's pretty noisy. So the first step that I want to do is to simplify it. So in order to do that, we go to Vector, Geometry Tools, Simplify. Now this is going to take maybe a little trial and error to get it set to the right amount of simplification. For me, I've done this already, and so that I know that the simplification I want is 0.0001 degrees. And then we're going to create a temporary layer and click Run. That was pretty fast, so we'll close that. Now let me make my new track a little thicker so we can see it. I'll make it green. And I'll turn off the base map. So you can see in this zoomed out perspective, they look basically the same. But if you zoom in, the red line has a lot of noise that the green line now does not have. So that's about a good amount of simplification. Once that looks the way you want, then let's save this as a file. So right click on the layer, click Export, Save Features As. And we're going to leave it in GeoJSON format. Give it a file name. I'll call that Tracks. And then two important things on this screen that you don't want to miss. First, make sure that your CRS, Coordinate Reference System, is in EPSG 4326. That's Web Mercator. And there's a tool we'll be using later that needs that CRS. Another important thing, down here next to Geometry Type, change it from Automatic to Line String, and then uncheck Include Z Dimension. Later I will illustrate why this part is important. And then click OK. All right, so now we have tracks. Let's give those some thickness as well. Actually, I'll make it look like that. And we'll turn off the other ones. Okay, so we're finished with step 1, add and simplify tracks. Now we want to create a bounding box. Turn my base map back on. Now this bounding box is important. It's going to be a sort of master reference for the outside of our model, and we're going to use it for a lot of clipping and things like that. So make sure you get this right. In order to do that, we will create a new layer. So we go to Layer, Create Layer, New Temporary Scratch Layer. We can call it whatever we want. It's temporary. It's going to be a polygon, and then we'll click OK. All right. Now you can see here this pencil icon. That's the edit. That's already on because this is a new layer. If it's not on for some reason, you can toggle that here. And then you want this toolbar. If you don't have that, go to View, Toolbars, Shape Digitizing Toolbar. Then you click on the rectangle tool. Click click in the center of the area that you want once, and then you move the mouse around until you find exactly where you want the outline of your model to be. I'm going to pick this pretty quickly, but you might want to take a little more care. When it's where you want, right-click, and you'll have a bounding box. Let's save that. So right-click, export, save features as. GeoJSON again. We'll give it a file name. I'm going to call this bbox. And of course, make sure the CRS is still 4326. We don't have to do anything else, so click OK. We'll remove the scratch layer. And let's take the fill off of this bounding box so we can see through it. Oh. So just turn off the fill. Great. So that's all set. That was step 2, create the bounding box. Now we're going to add and clip water body data. This is a pretty standard GIS operation. I got my water bodies from the National Hydrography Database, and I already clipped them to the area, so you don't have to watch me do that part. I also just brought in the major lakes, and I took off some of the water lines and things like that. Now we have tracks, bounding box, and water body data, and it's time to move on to put these layers onto some aerial imagery. If you haven't saved your water bodies, make sure you save that to the same place as a GeoJSON file. Okay, now I'm going to switch to the next tool. This is a free website called KeplerGL, and it's a great quick map data visualization tool. What I have loaded here already is my tracks on top of a nice aerial image, but something is strange about it. If you can see my mouse, there's this very clear ridge line here, and I know that the hike is right along that ridge line, but this line is not there. It's off, it's misaligned. And I thought I had some kind of projection confusion or something like that, and it was only after a while I looked at it in 3D view, clicking 3D map here. Oh, there we go. That you can see what's happening is it's being rendered at its elevation, and the satellite imagery is flat. So there's some parallax happening. That's why we removed the elevation data from the tracks. All right, I'm going to reload Kepler so that we can see what it looks like from the beginning. And I'm going to take my bounding box, my tracks, and my water bodies, and just drop them on there. Okay, first step, let's change the background. It's got this dark map background that you can barely see. So we'll go over here to this base map and change it from dark to satellite. And this area, when you zoom in far enough, has some really nice Maxar imagery in the background. So let's go back here to the layers. Before we start styling, I'm going to add data. And I'm going to pull in one more copy of the tracks. I'll explain that in a minute. All right, here's the area. So the first thing is that you want to make sure that you stack your layers in this order. The bounding box on top, then the 2 tracks layers with the water bodies on the bottom. And then let's get to styling. So the bounding box, we want no fill. Turn off the fill. We'll make the stroke black, and we'll make the stroke width 5 points. Great. We can close that. For the tracks, for the top layer of tracks, I'm going to pick a bright orange color so it kind of pops out from the background. You can pick whatever color you feel like using. And I'm going to give a stroke width of 2. Oh, there's something important about the bounding box I forgot. If we go here and we go to the fill color, and we click this little, I'm sorry, not the fill color, the stroke color. Click this little hamburger menu. You can see it gave it an opacity of 0.8. That needs to be 1. So make sure that's all the way opaque. Okay, so we have 2 layers styled. Let's move on to the bottom tracks layer. I'm going to make that kind of a light gray, a medium gray, medium darkish gray. And then I'm going to give it a stroke width of 3. And there you can see that gives my line a nice casing, helps it to pop out from the background a little bit. And you can play with the colors there a little bit, depending on what your satellite imagery looks like. Finally, the water bodies. We don't want a stroke, so we turn that off. And for the fill, I kind of scrolled around on this satellite image until I came up here to this beautiful lake here. This is Crescent Lake. And I'm going to try to pick a color that looks like that color. And I think that we'll pick like that one. That looks pretty close. And then we'll scroll back and we can see the lakes look like. Now I said the water body data was optional, and it is, but here's why. When I turn it off, you can see the lakes here just look kind of like black holes. Sometimes lakes have reflections in them or other visual issues that you don't want in your map. So if you cover it with some water body data, it looks nicer and cleaner, even if the data doesn't quite align. Like in this case, you can see it doesn't quite line up with the map, but at the scale we're going to use it, it's okay. Now we're all done with styling, and when it looks how you want, I'm going to go ahead and take a screenshot. Now, Screenshot for the Win is the name of a great talk that I saw at the NACIS conference last year by Tim Miko, all about interesting things that he uses screenshots for in his work, and I highly recommend that talk. I have a link at in the description of this video that links to all kinds of resources for this talk, and there's a link to that there. Okay, back to it. I'm going to open up IrfanView, which is a great lightweight tool that I use for screenshots and things. I'm going to paste that in there. Now what you want to do is crop it to right in the middle of that black bar. Take the time to make sure that it's perfectly even all around. I'm going to do it quickly here, but you might want to zoom in and make sure your crop is a little more accurate. And then we have our aerial image. I'm going to save that. I'm going to call it High Divide Aerial. And we don't want a transparent color. Great. So now we're done with A, create the aerial image. And I'm going to go back to QGIS for the elevation image. Let's turn off the tracks and the water bodies. Now again, getting DEM imagery is kind of a common GIS practice, so I'm not going to walk you through the whole details of it, but I do want to make one point. Here's my bounding box, and there were two images that covered that area, so I merged them into one. And you can see this weird black twisty border. You can ignore that. It won't affect your ultimate image. But one other thing to look at is over here in the layer list, the max and the min. Sometimes when you do this merging, the minimum will get set to 0 instead of the actual minimum. So you want to make sure that the minimum is the lowest minimum of the tiles that you use to combine, and that the maximum is the highest maximum of the tiles that you combined. Here this is pretty close, so I'm going to leave it like that. Now, right click on the bounding box and zoom to layer. That brings it all the way close in. And now go up to Project, Import Export, Export Map to Image. So for the extent, we're going to calculate that from our bounding box layer. That will clip the map perfectly to that box. Oh, one thing. Hold on, we'll cancel that. We need to turn off the bounding box, so no parts of it are displayed. All right, now we'll go to Project, Import Export, Export Map to Image. Calculate from layer using the bounding box. And I'm going to raise the resolution to 300. And then you can save. And it will ask me what I want to call it. I'm just going to call that elevation. All right, so we have finished with preparing the elevation data. Really quick before I move on, I want to tell you that I got mine from the very excellent Washington LiDAR portal, which has a lot of LiDAR-derived elevation data for Washington State. If you're mapping somewhere else, you might have to be able to find yours somewhere else, and there are lots of resources online for finding elevation data. Okay, so moving on, it is time to step into Blender. I'm a Blender beginner, I would say. I figured out how to do this particular workflow, and that's it. If you want to learn more about Blender, I will not be the first person today to recommend Daniel Huffman's very excellent tutorial here. On his website, I have a link to that in my resources. He explains why you might use Blender, and then here's the table of contents. Highly recommend that. He takes the time to really help you understand what you're doing and also why. I won't have the time to do that. So I'm just going to walk you through my workflow. Okay, so here we are in Blender. I'm going to click General to create a new file. And then first a couple quick cleanup steps. Turn off the camera, the cube, and the light. We don't need those because we're not rendering. I'm going to go down here in the lower corner until I get a crosshair, and I'm going to click and drag to get rid of the timeline to get myself a little more space on the screen. And one more thing, I'm going to make sure we have the add-ons we need. So go to Edit, Preferences, and then on the Add-ons tab, we're going to look for two to make sure they're there. First, under Import Export, we want to make sure Import Images as Planes is checked. And then under Mesh, we want the 3D Print toolbox. Make sure those are both checked. All right, let's get started. Go to File, Import, Import Images as Planes. And here we're going to go and pick our elevation image and import it. All right, here it is, but we can see it's rotated. So sometimes that happens, no big deal. We'll go over here to the Object Properties, and you can see I've got some rotation going here. I don't know why that is, but I'm going to set them all to 0. Great. Now, we'll do a really quick check to make sure this is the image we expect and that Blender was able to read it. So up here in the shading, I'm going to change this from material to texture. And we can see, yes, that is the DEM. It looks right. For now, we'll just set this back to material. All right, time for some terrain. Over here, on click the wrench icon for modifier properties. We're going to add a couple of modifiers. We're going to add, under Generate, Subdivision Surface. And we're also going to add, under Deform, Displace. Now I'm going to walk you through the settings that I used for this process. In the Subdivide modifier, change it from Catmull Clark to Simple. And then set your render and viewport settings to a higher level. So I found for me that 9 was a good middle ground between quality and performance. And I'm setting both of them so that what's rendered looks like what's in the viewport. I'm pretty sure that the render value is what's used when we export. And then under the Displace modifier, I'm going to click New to add a new texture. Then you're going to look for this little slider bar over here and click that to open the Texture tab. Here we are in the Texture tab. Click the Open button. And we're going to pick the very same elevation image we picked before. Okay, something's starting to happen. You'll see it previewed here, and you'll also see some spiky terrain happening. Before we leave this, there's one other setting. Expand Mapping, and change Extension to Extend. Now we'll go back to the modifiers by clicking on the wrench, because we have a few more settings for the Displace modifier. Make sure that Direction says Normal, and then change Texture Coordinate to UV. Okay, and then let's reduce the strength. A good setting for me and my terrain was 0.2. And all of a sudden, we have something that actually looks like a 3D map. Now you can play with this for your own terrain. The strength sort of roughly correlates to the Z exaggeration, so you can adjust that, and you can play with the render options. Remember, this will be 3D printed, so it doesn't have to be super, super high fidelity. Once you like the way that it looks, this will be a good time to save your file. So save your file, and I'm going to call it HighDivide.blend. Save. Okay. Now, once it's how you like, first click Apply under the Subdivide, and then click Apply under Displace. This is where what I'm doing starts to differ from what you might do if you were making a terrain map for rendering. As you can see, we have a flat surface that has been bent. Not perfect for 3D printing just yet. We need to extrude it. So first, go to the Edit mode up here. Now make sure that your model is orange. That means it's selected. If it's not, you can select it by clicking up here. Now, right up here in this little diagram, click on any of the X or Y circles. That will give you a straight-on side view. And then position your cursor underneath the model and click the E for extrude. So this is on your keyboard. Just click and release the E button. And it'll take a minute, and then your cursor will change. Now I'm going to drag downward. I'm not holding any buttons. I'm just rolling the mouse, and you can see I can extrude it. However, it's following this slightly diagonal line, and I want to lock it to the Z axis instead. So I'll press and release the Z button on my keyboard. Okay, now it's locked to the Z direction, and I can choose my thickness. You want to make it at least thicker than the lowest part of your model. And if you want to make it this thick, I think that's probably just going to be wasteful. Your model will be more expensive because it will use more material. So pick something that is roughly about as thick as you want, and then make it a little thicker, because some of it will get cut off in a minute. When it's where you like, go ahead and click your left mouse button. And now you can see we have an extruded model. While we have the bottom selected, we want to flatten it. So let me go back to my side view. We want to flatten the bottom. So for this, I'm going to tell you a series of key presses on your keyboard. Okay, we're going to click the S button for scale, then Z for Z axis, and then 0, and enter. And that magical series has made us a model. Let's go back to the object mode and take a look at it. Very nice. Now this is looking like something we could 3D print. Maybe I will save right now, just in case. Okay, let's drape our aerial image on top. I'm going to go up here in the layout menu and choose shading. It might take a minute to load. I'm not going to take the time to explain this. There are other great videos explaining about these little nodes and this diagram. I'm just going to show you how I set this up. And to do that, I'm going to overlay this image, which is how I want it to look. I'm going to use that as a model. Okay, so we need to add 2 extra nodes. Add, input, texture coordinate, that here, add, vector, mapping. I'm going to connect the UV to vector, vector to vector, and then down over here I'm going to remove this line that says alpha. Just drop it off. A couple other quick changes here in the orange node, where it's showing your elevation still. We want to now change that to the aerial image. So click the File to Open button, and then from the this is the Open file. Choose your aerial image and click Open. And then change Linear to Smart and Clip to Extend. That's all we need to do. Now let's go back to up here at the top. Oh wait, let me turn off the overlay so you can see what I'm doing. Up here at the top, click Layout again. Now we don't see it just yet. We have to turn our texture on. So up here in the corner under Shading, click Texture. And now you can see we have a 3D model. I'm just going to pause here to use the CartoBlend hashtag. This is from another great NASIS talk from last year's conference by Nick Underwood, who gives a good overview of a lot of interesting map type things you can do in Blender. But moving back to my model, it's ready to go. You can see it has some nice black sides. That's because of the thick black outline we had on our aerial image. And it's 3-dimensional and ready to go. So I'm going to save my file. And then up here there's this little tiny triangle pointery thing. Click on that, which brings the toolbox open. Then click 3D Print and Export. If you're 3D printing it at home, or if you have a friend with a 3D printer, STL is the format that you want. But if you're going to send it to a commercial service to get it printed in color, you want X3D. And then click Export. Now, there's one extra step that we have to squeeze in here because there's a bug right now. I'm going to show you really quick. There's this Blender bug where the texture is not saved. So quickly, we need to add that ourselves. All right, so here is my saved file. Luckily, that's just an XML file, so I can open it in any text editor I want. I have VS Code for my text editor. Okay, it's a bunch of XML. All we want to do is grab this particular text. Oh, I realize I used an underscore here, so I'll change that. This particular text into the XML file. Make sure this is the exact name of your aerial URL, or your aerial image. So let me copy that. In this file, look for the appearance tag. Add a new line underneath it, and just paste that bit in. Then save it and close it. Oh, save. I don't need the undo redo stack. Okay, now we're ready to send it to an online service. I like to use shapeways.com. You'll need to set up an account, and once you do, you can go to the upload page. And then all you need to do is create a zip file that includes your X3D file and your aerial image. Just make those into a zip. And drag it up here. Now it's going to take a while actually to analyze your model and prepare it for printing. So I'm going to go up here and show you one that I've already done. Oh, hold on. My 3D models. All right, here's the final one. It's already been analyzed. There's a couple things that you want to make sure of on this screen. First of all, I'll let that render, but you want to make sure that your model is showing in color. If it's not, something is wrong with the texture and it didn't get to Shapeways and it won't print in color. So make sure you see color there. Also check the size. Change this to inches. You can see it's about 4 by 4 inches. It may not be the right size at first, so you may need to resize it. And then we'll pick sandstone, which is one of the two materials that you can print in color. Choose full color, and you can see it's going to be $113. Not super cheap, but for a memento, a keepsake, I feel like that would be worth it. Then you can just add to cart and place your order. And that's it. Here again is the model. And just to take this demo all the way to the end, I had a kind friend of mine 3D print the model that we just walked through, and here's how it looks. Thank you very much for watching, and I've been enjoying the Map Stuff Day, so thanks to Daniel Huffman for organizing that. Oh yeah. Well, I don't know how to answer them now that I'm out of the stream. I can.
You can
Oh yeah.
probably talk in the chat window.